Jazzcast Pros.
Why do you go to church? If you have any sort of religious practice, what is something that you get out of going to church? A lot of times you feel better, you feel rejuvenated, you feel grounded, you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel like you can take on your week. One thing that we do in my community, not every week, but it's something that I have tried to practice in the past and tends to fall off, but is something that does make my week go better, is when I go to Money Church. So today we're going to talk about what going to Money Church looks like for me, why it helps, and I have 3 steps. They'll take you 20-30 minutes on a weekly basis that are just going to set you up for success in your business. Welcome to High Vibe Table Talks, the podcast to help you, the current or aspiring solopreneur, navigate the messy middle so you can make both an income and an impact. Hi, I'm Rashawn, and I love creating safe spaces for women to be courageous in their dreams. After spending a decade working in sales for a startup and talking with hundreds of other women entrepreneurs, I know it can be lonely, but you can do this. We are having impactful conversations with people walking similar paths to you, so pull up a seat. This is High Vibe Table Talks. So let's talk about going to Money Church. I sat down last week to record this episode, and I had a completely different episode that I was going to record. And I am going to record that episode because I do think it is important. So this is kind of a part 1 of part 2 talking about money. And the episode I was going to record was around how to show up in your business when you need money. You want to have just like an insurgence of cash. And what are some things that you can do as a business owner to do so? And why I had a really hard time doing it is because I was starting to spiral and go into scarcity mode about money. So I'm like, how can I create an episode around bringing in more money when I'm not in the right headspace with money myself? And so I said, I really don't feel comfortable doing that episode. I don't think it's going to be good. So what is something that I can do? And so I was breaking apart okay, let me find something that I do on a weekly basis in my business that I can break out step by step of how to do this in my business that you can do as well. And nothing logistically was popping in my head, but I was going through and just kind of thinking about other things that I do. And one thing that came to me is okay, well, I really need a money mindset recheck right now. So if I need that, I'm sure there are other people that do too. And that is something that I can talk through step by step of here are 3 things I do when I feel myself go into that scarcity mindset when it comes to money. And so there have been, I'll share a couple personal stories when I have found myself in that, because I do think the first thing that is so important is awareness. And that's being aware when your brain is going into scarcity, not just around money, but anything. Money tends to be something for me that is a trigger for me to go into scarcity. And so that is something I have to be aware of. So I think, we have to become aware and then we can start to take action. And so the action are the 3 tips. But I think before you go into any of these tips, it's being aware. And so, one time, I think I shared this on the podcast previously, but one time I was driving by Lowe's. There was a sign out front that said, need a roof repair? We do financing for roof repairs. And I was oh my God, if something happened to our roof, what would we do? I don't have money to finance our roof. Side note, our roof is fine. We have had 0 evidence that we will need anything done with our roof in the near future. But I saw that and immediately went and oh my God, if something happened to our roof, I don't know what I would do. So then I was whoa, okay, I need to check in with where I am with money, because in my opinion, that gut reaction is something that I have when I'm in a good place with money. And so that's when I was okay, let's reset. Let's start getting back our books. And I'll share a couple of my favorite money books with you at the end of this. If you listen to other episodes, you're not going to be surprised. I've mentioned all of them on this podcast before. So if you've listened to the podcast, I'm pretty sure you've heard of these books, but I'll share the books that I like to check in with towards the end of this episode. So story number 2 that is kind of more recent is one of my goals for the year is to pay off all of my credit card debt that I accrued, starting up the business and going full time, because there were times that I was making less money than needed to output. So I do have some credit card debt. And so I have been actively trying to pay it down and swung the pendulum a little bit too far the one way of like paying into it. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I still have these bills, just with different things that have come up. It just, what I needed to pay was more than what I had put aside, because then the rest was going to the credit card debt. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I'm, going broke again, when I had to like check in and say, everything's fine. It's okay. Like, you're not going to like lose your house because you put a couple $100 more on the credit card bill than you wanted to. And there's a little bit of an imbalance. Life is imbalanced. Again, I was like, okay, my relationship with money right now isn't where I want it to be. So what am I going to do? So those are times where I became aware. So now we're going to get into the 3 steps. And I literally did this week, because last week was when I had that panic of like, we don't have enough money. And so I did these 3 things. And that's when I was like, oh, this is what I can talk about on the podcast. So step number 1 for me is, where are you? And so I use Credit Karma as one of the tools that I use to give me like a broad picture of where am I with my money? How much do I have in my checking? How much do I have in my savings? What are my balances for my different credit cards? And so realistically, stepping back and saying, okay, I looked at my checking and was like, there's not a lot of money in there. But I can look at Credit Karma and say, what is the realistic, the data of where I am with my money at the moment? And so looking at that, I was like, oh, okay. And I will tell you that there have been times where I have looked at it and gone like, okay, this is not ideal. Like my balances are higher than I want it to be. My credit score is lower than I want it to be. For whatever reason, it's not where I want it to be, but at least I know what the truth is. Our brains really like to spiral. And so when you can step in and say, okay, this is what the actual state of the matter is, now I can take action. Before I looked at it, I was like, oh my God, I have no money. Like, I'm not going to be able to put food on the table next week, which is not true. I take a step back and look, oh, I could put, like, we're good. But even if, let's say it wasn't, let's say I was like, I have these 2 bills coming out and, in auto pay, and this one is coming before the next time I'm going to, if that is the case, at least now we can take action on it. Now I can do something about it because I know what actually is the truth. And so step number 1 is, where are you? What is your money status at the moment? What is going in? What is coming out? When I first started down this relationship with money, and I was first using Mint, and it was me going through and saying, what's going in, what's coming out every single month? Why am I spending so much on this? And one of the realizations that I had this week, when I was like, why is my Spectrum bill so high? And so now, again, I can't fix my Spectrum bill for this month, but I know going forward, like, that needs to change. My Spectrum bill is way too high. I don't think we should be paying that amount of money for the services that we get. Now let's go change it. Let's reduce like what our monthly cost is as a household. And now I have the facts. And again, now I can take action. I can't change the fact that it was what it was last month, but I'm going to do something about it go forward. And so what's coming in, what's leaving? Do I need to cut anything? I'm not a believer of like the Dave Ramsey method of like just trim all the fat and don't do anything fun until all of your debt is paid off and you have hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings. I'm also going to take action to be able to make more money, and I'm going to sell more, and I'm going to do all these things that bring more income into my family, not just trim the fat. Because again, like, I don't spend a lot of money on Starbucks, but it's like, oh, are you going out and buying Starbucks? Yeah. I'm sorry, that was $100 this year. Like, that's not making a big dent on my student loan debt. Anywho, so step number 1 is, where are you with your money? Step number 2, what are your goals? Where would you like to be? While I had like a bit of a meltdown of like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to put food on the table. And that wasn't true. Like, I still, by the end of the year, have a certain place where I would like to be with my money. My credit card debt would be at a certain place. I would be bringing in a certain amount of money in every month. And so there are these goals that I have. And so I can start to say, where am I now versus where I want to be? It's kind of like getting out of the I'm drowning into like, okay, I am safe. And then what would be fun for me, a fun place for me to be? What would be like just awesome? I connected with those. We talk a lot on the podcast about connecting with your why. And this is one of those instances, like why I want to build a business and why I am launching this sales course is because I want to make an impact on a lot of other women's lives and make an income that supports my family in this like comfortable place where like there's enough money coming in that we take trips, and my course is running on autopilot in the summer. So because we're down on the beach for a week or whatever it is. And so both dollar wise, like what would I love to have in my bank account on a regular basis? And what would I like to be doing with that money? So it's really kind of like saying, hi, I see you, scarcity. You are trying to protect me and you want me to like not go crazy, but that isn't where I don't want to live in a fight or flight at my subconscious on a regular basis. And so I see you and I hear you and you have a place. My relationship with money is not the place for you. So now I'm switching and saying, okay, where would I love to be? And there may be, when you take an actual look at where you are, there may be a lot of places where you're like, oh, I am comfortable right now. Like I'm really comfortable with the amount of money that's coming in. Do I want to trim a little bit? Do I want to be paying that amount in Spectrum? No. But I'm like really comfortable with where I am. So I just want to keep doing that. And there may be some other places where you have a little bit loftier goals, but it's really just quieting the scarcity mindset and stepping into abundance. And that takes a while. That's not something you're going to do overnight. It wasn't like I read this book and was cured of all of my money woes. For me, it was a process. I would say it was probably like an 18-month process to like really break myself of a lot of the habits that I had. I was in a much better place. And then I focused on something else and those muscles tended to get weaker. Just like when you're exercising, every time you go to the gym, you get a little bit stronger. And then if you're like, oh, I'm in a really good place, like with exercise at the moment, and then you take a year off and all of a sudden you're like, I can't lift the type of weights that I used to. Well, of course, because like your body you have to use those muscles to continue to strengthen them. Even if you want to like stay the same, you still have to use those muscles. And so I wasn't in a place where I was using those muscles. And all of a sudden, that's when the roof incident happened. And I drove by Lowe's one day, went into scarcity, started spiraling out about our roof collapsing and how we were going to pay for it. And that's when I was like, okay, this scarcity mindset has crept back in and it's impacting me at a subconscious level. Like everywhere I was looking for a place from a place of lack. And I was like, I don't have enough because of this. I don't have enough for that. And it really does. It's one of those muscles that infiltrates a lot of how you show up in the world on a daily basis. So step number 2 is, where do you want to go? What are your goals with your money? Step number 3 is creating a money mindset ritual. Being really conscious about the conversations you're having about money on a daily basis. And there's so many thoughts that we have in our brain that are subconscious that we're not aware of. And they just are firing all day. And so having a dedicated amount of time that you can hone in on the types of things you want to say about yourself and with money, that's really important. And so why I started this episode out talking about church is because in my community, there were times where we would go to money church every Wednesday. Again, that was one of the things that was like important to me. And so that was one thing I infused into the community. Like when I think I first heard about like Money Church from Rachel Rogers, she was just talking about like getting your mindset right with money. And it's taking these steps of like, where are you? What are your goals? And how can I like work on those? You know, when I used to leave church, we went to church a lot growing up. I don't practice. I'm not actively in any religion at the moment. But for me, it's more about like spirituality and connecting with the universe. But every time I leave those sessions, I feel uplifted. I feel grounded. I feel heard. I feel like connected with my why, with my purpose. I just feel motivated. So maybe when you leave actual church, it makes you want to go and like do good for the community, do good for the earth, do good for a cause that you believe in. And when you leave Money Church, it's like, I want to do right by what my goals are monetarily. I want to change how I think about money on a daily basis. And so you just feel you have a different spring in your step when it comes to your relationship with money after leaving Money Church. So if you are like, okay, I'm ready to go to Money Church this week, where do I start? And so here's where I'm going to give you a couple of recommendations, because step 3 is like the money mindset stuff. And so maybe you find a mantra that you really connect with and want to journal on, write over and over again, sit and meditate on, whatever that is. One thing for me, especially in the beginning, that I really had a hard time with was my worthiness of being enough to bring in more money. And so saying I am enough, I am worthy was a big step for me. And I will tell you, when I first started saying it, I did not believe it. I would say it and I would have like a physical reaction to saying it. And that is where like the 18-month cycle kind of I'm speaking on is like when I first started, the things I was saying felt very untrue. And then they started to feel like, okay, maybe. And now I can say them just as truth. They just are truth now. There's no like, oh, it feels really uncomfortable to say that, but I guess I kind of believe it. It's like, no, I am worthy of bringing in 6 figures on a regular basis from my business. I'm not doing it at the moment, but I'm worthy of it. Like, I'm going to keep taking action to do that, because that is something that's important to me and I want to have happen. And so I'm going to make it happen. So being worthy and being enough were 2 that really were hard in the beginning for me. The second one that came up for me was you can either make an income or an impact. And so you're either out there. And so there's this inherent like greediness when it comes to money in our society. And so deconstructing that was another step for me. And so being really introspective on your worthiness. If you hold any negative emotions around money, like greed and kind of nastiness and bad people make a lot of money, like deconstructing that is a really good place to start. I think I've mentioned in an episode before was writing a letter to money was a very good place to start. There are a lot of books out there on money mindset. My top ones that I would recommend are You Are a Badass at Making Money by Jen Sincero. That's where I first wrote a letter to money that was really impactful. We Should All Be Millionaires by Rachel Rogers. That one was also very great. It definitely talked about like worthiness, enoughness, and a lot of the cultural stigmas that happen around money. She also has an accompanying workbook, which was really great. I'm working through that currently. Amanda Francis, Rich as Fuck, is a great one. And here's another one. Here's another thing of like, it's a continual process. I picked up that book at least 3 times, probably 4 or 5 times before I made my way all the way through it. And I would get mad at the book and I would be like, you don't know what you're talking about. Or like, I just had visceral reactions to things that she would talk about in that book. And I would close it and I would be like, no. But then I would like think on it and it would percolate. And giving it more tries was definitely something that I needed, because I just needed to be in a different headspace in my relationship with money. So if you're reading any of these books and being like, ugh, and Jensen Chero, she talks about a book she was reading by Wallace Waddle. I'm blanking on the name of the book now, but like the first page in that book, she was like, ugh, gross, Waddle, and closed it. And now it's like a book she recommends to everybody on money. So it's natural to have those reactions. Another one, it's like 50% mindset and 50% tactical, and it's called Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. That one was really good, and it's all about like building a business that pays you first and not like living on scraps in the business, but it's like it shifts the mindset of I have to pay everybody else and then I'll pay myself. I have to make sure that everybody else gets what they need and then I'll be okay. And so it is a mindset shift of how I think a lot of us start our business, but then too, it's more practical around here are steps that you need to take to have a profit first focused business. And he's really funny. Like there's a lot of lightness into that book. So that one is really good. There's also a lot of quotes out there and journaling prompts and things like that that you can find on money mindset. So use the internet, use ChatGPT. The last thing I wanted to say on this is that I didn't like start to spiral out and then go to money church. It was like, this is what I need to do. I disassociated into my phone for way too long. The first thing I did was like just find a monotonous game or TikTok. And I was like, I don't want to think about it. So I'm just going to ignore it. So if that's something that like you do, you have done, I want to say, welcome to being a human. In next week's episode, I believe we actually talk with Ashley Daigle about how to break up with your phone. And it just talks about like our relationship with our phone, which for me was not super healthy this week when I started to spiral. So if that's you, you're very normal. People spend billions of dollars in keeping you hooked to it. And if you want to have a different relationship with your phone, stay tuned for next week's episode. And then the week after that, I will be talking about how to infuse some money into your business relatively quickly without feeling icky. Because now that we're in a good mindset with money, now we're going to go make some more. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. Make sure you rate or leave a review. That would be incredible. Share this episode with someone if you think they need a money mindset reset. And until next time, remember that big dreams and small steps will transform your life.
The greatest.